The sun beat down on the Elmwood Park Pavilion, baking the asphalt. The announcement, delivered with Sarah's usual crisp enunciation, carried past the barbecue smoke and the drone of cicadas. Her words cut through the usual hum of Saturday afternoon pleasantries. "I'm leaving Frank," she said again, louder this time, as if to ensure everyone understood the finality. "For Kevin." My coffee cup, still warm, rested on the checkered tablecloth. I observed its steam dissipating. Dale Miller, across from me, stopped mid-chew on a hot dog. His eyes, usually half-lidded, widened slightly. Mitch Stevens, standing by the grill, slowly turned, his spatula forgotten in his hand. Kevin then walked onto the stage, a half-smile on his face. He put his arm around Sarah's waist. The gesture was public, calculated, and unequivocal. The crowd, perhaps 50 people, remained silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the distant laughter from the playground, detached and irrelevant. Sarah had not looked at me. Her gaze was fixed somewhere beyond the last row of picnic tables, towards the cornfields that bordered the park. "He just wasn't enough," she added. The sentence was a clean cut, devoid of warmth or regret. My mind, which had momentarily stalled, clicked back into gear. It began to catalog. The immediate consequence registered. The public humiliation was clear. The deeper consequence, financial, had been a gnawing suspicion for weeks. The empty joint account confirmed it. I stood up, pushing my chair back slowly. The scrape of plastic on pavement echoed in the unnatural quiet. I picked up my coffee cup, walked it to the nearby trash receptacle, and deposited it. My movements were precise. I nodded briefly to Dale, whose mouth was still slightly agape. He did not return the gesture. I turned and walked towards the parking lot. No one called out. No one attempted to stop me. The silence held. My truck started on the first turn of the key. The air conditioning hummed to life. I drove out of the park, taking the familiar route home. The speedometer registered exactly 45 miles per hour. The familiar landscape of single-story houses and trimmed lawns passed by in an ordered sequence. I noted the specific time, 2:17 p.m. The driveway was empty when I pulled in. Sarah's car, a silver sedan, was gone. It confirmed a part of the calculation. I entered the house using my key. The air inside was still and cool. I walked through each room. The master bedroom closet was half empty. Her clothes, mostly her casual wear and work suits, were missing. The shoe rack held only my shoes. Her side of the dresser was bare. The jewelry box, a wooden one I had given her for our 10th anniversary, was open and empty. In the bathroom, her specific brand of shampoo and conditioner, her expensive face creams, were absent from the shower caddy and countertop. I noted the precise items: the gold locket I had bought her, the diamond earrings from her grandmother, the pearl necklace. In the office, the filing cabinet drawer where we kept important documents was slightly ajar. I pulled it open. The marriage certificate was gone. Our tax returns for the past 5 years remained. The deed to the house, solely in my name, was still there. The bank statements from our joint checking account were also present, showing a zero balance as of 2 days prior. I had noticed a slight reduction in funds recently, which she had explained as prepaying some bills. I had accepted the explanation. Now I understood the pattern. These were not random acts. This was a methodical extraction, culminating in a public declaration. I sat at my desk, pulling out a legal pad and a pen. The first item on the list was contact Larry Brooks. Larry was known for handling divorces with a pragmatic, no-nonsense approach. The second item was secure all financial records. The third was inventory all remaining assets. My hand was steady as I wrote. The logical part of my brain had taken over. Emotion was a luxury I could not afford. There would be time later for reflection. For now, there was only the cold, hard work of dismantling a life. I picked up the phone. The number for Larry Brooks was already programmed into my contact list. A neighbor had recommended him years ago for estate planning, though I had never called. The receptionist answered on the second ring. Her voice was practiced, efficient. I stated my name and the nature of my urgency. She placed me on hold for a moment. Then Larry's voice, gravelly but clear, came through the line. "Frank," he said without preamble. "My receptionist gave me the gist. I was at the picnic myself, saw the whole thing. Tough spot. Can you be here at 8 tomorrow morning, my first appointment? I can, I confirmed. I'll bring what I have. Good. Don't worry about too much tonight. Just get the basics together. Anything financial, property, marriage cert, if you have it. She took the marriage certificate, I stated. Larry paused. Understood. We'll work around it. See you then. I hung up. The conversation was brief, functional. It provided a framework for the immediate future. The next step was preparation. I returned to the legal pad. The inventory needed to be exhaustive. I walked through the house again, this time with a camera and a finer comb. Every empty space was documented. The missing items from the bedroom, the specific brands of toiletries, the jewelry, the pearl necklace, a family heirloom from Sarah's grandmother. I thought it irreplaceable to her. The diamond earrings, a birthday gift from me years ago. Their absence was not just a loss of value, it was a statement. In the kitchen, her favorite coffee mug was gone from the rack. The framed photo of us from our honeymoon was missing from the counter. Small details, easily overlooked, but they contributed to the picture of a thorough, planned departure. She hadn't left a note. No letter, no hasty scrawl, only the public declaration and the systematic stripping of what she considered hers, or perhaps what she could convert into an advantage. I went back to the office, pulling out old bank statements and investment portfolio summaries. The joint checking account, as I noted earlier, was empty. The statements showed a gradual decline over the past 3 months. Not large, suspicious sums all at once, but consistent, smaller withdrawals. $200 here, $300 there, usually on a Tuesday or Wednesday. Groceries, she would say, errands. I had not questioned it. My personal checking account, solely in my name, remained untouched. Our retirement accounts, also separate, were still intact. She had targeted only the shared, easily accessible funds. Her inquiries about the value of the house, whether it was only in my name, had made more sense in retrospect. She had been mapping the terrain. I remembered a conversation from 3 weeks ago. Sarah had asked about the precise balance in my Roth IRA. She'd framed it as, just curious about our overall financial picture. I had provided the number. At the time, it felt like an act of transparency. Now it felt like reconnaissance. Kevin's name surfaced in my thoughts. He worked in real estate, often dealt with liquid assets and quick transactions. Their professional lives, now intertwined personally, suggested a certain practical alignment. From the window, I saw Dale Miller getting into his car slowly. He glanced towards my house, then looked away quickly, accelerating faster than usual down the street. Mitch Stevens' porch light flickered on and off. The small-town grapevine would be working overtime. Their reactions were not surprised at Sarah's announcement, but perhaps at the bluntness of it, or the public nature. The implications were clear. My reputation, like my bank account, had been publicly emptied. I spent the rest of the evening organizing the papers into a folder. Old tax returns, property deed, remaining bank statements, a printout of the current zero balance, and a meticulously detailed list of every missing item with an estimated value. I wrote down the timeline: the picnic, 2:00 p.m., her announcement, my departure, arrival home, 2:25 p.m., discovery of missing car, empty closets, depleted accounts. The precise nature of these actions began to form a narrative. It was not spontaneous. It was planned. The folder lay open on my desk, filled with the stark evidence of a marriage dismantled. My eyes drifted over the bank statements, the missing item list, and a recent photo of Sarah and the children I'd found in a forgotten drawer. I was still in the house, the silence amplifying the methodical clicking of my mind. My thoughts turned, inevitably, to the preceding months, trying to identify the precise moment when the facade began to crack. There was one evening, roughly 3 months ago, that now replayed with chilling clarity. I had just returned from a 2-week trip to Singapore, a new account I'd been instrumental in securing. The firm had celebrated, but then the axe fell. Streamlining, they'd called it, 55, experience, and suddenly surplus. I chose to tell Sarah gently. They let me go, I'd said, sitting across from her at the kitchen island, a week after my return. The kids were at a friend's. The house was quiet. She had been stirring her coffee. Her hand froze. A faint blush crept up her neck, a telltale sign I'd learned to recognize over 2 decades. She fumbled for words, pushing her mug aside. "Oh, Frank, I'm so sorry. Is it market pressure? I've been reading about that." Her voice was carefully modulated, almost too calm. I watched her, gauging the reaction. It wasn't the shock I'd expected from a partner of 20 years, not exactly. More like a performative sympathy, a practiced response. That night, we had dinner as a family for the first time in 4 months. My travel schedule had been brutal, and Sarah's social calendar equally dense. I tried to inject some normalcy into the forced gathering. I told Kevin and Grace about the high-rises in Singapore, the strange food, the team-building exercises on a catamaran. They listened, nodding, but their eyes held a distant quality, as if they were observing a character in a story, not their father. Then, from behind their backs, they produced a small, clumsily wrapped package. "Happy birthday, Dad!" Kevin exclaimed, pushing it across the table. Grace chimed in, "We picked it out ourselves." It was a new fishing lure, an expensive one I'd admired in a catalog. My heart felt a pang, not just of warmth for their thoughtfulness, but of something else, a hollow ache. Sarah gasped, "Oh my God, Frank, I'm so sorry, I totally forgot." Her hand flew to her mouth, the blush deepened, spreading across her cheeks. Her eyes darted to me, then to the children. The apology felt less about my forgotten birthday and more about the children witnessing her oversight. "It's all right, honey," I said, forcing a smile, focusing on Kevin and Grace. "This is perfect. Exactly what I wanted." Their faces lit up. I deflected Sarah's embarrassment, trying to smooth over the awkwardness. It was easier to manage the children's joy than Sarah's sudden, transparent discomfort. After dinner, the children excused themselves to do homework. The house settled back into its familiar quiet, save for the clatter of dishes as I began to clear the table. Sarah stood by the sink, pretending to wipe down the counter. The tension in the air was palpable, a heavy, unspoken weight. "What's really going on, Sarah?" I asked, my voice low. "You've seemed distant for weeks, and forgetting my birthday?" She turned, her eyes watery. I'm just so lost, Frank," she whispered, her voice cracking. "With you gone so much, I feel depressed, like I don't know who I am anymore." She leaned into me then, her head against my chest, her body initially stiff before relaxing, almost reluctantly. I held her, feeling the unfamiliarity of her embrace. She sobbed softly, a quiet, almost contained crying spell. "I need you here," she murmured into my shirt. "The kids need you. You need to spend more time with them. Real time." Now, looking at the empty accounts and the missing jewelry, those tears felt less like genuine distress and more like a carefully orchestrated performance. A calculated manipulation to manage my expectations, to deflect my attention. She wasn't lost. She was planning. And in my attempt to support her, I had missed the most critical signs of her impending departure. The cracks in the facade weren't just appearing, they were being meticulously widened by design. I took Sarah's advice. That evening, after the awkward birthday celebration, I went upstairs. Grace was hunched over her algebra textbook, her brow furrowed. I sat beside her, patiently guiding her through an equation, explaining the steps slowly. She eventually understood, a small smile of relief on her face. Then I moved to Kevin's room. He was struggling with a history report on the Cold War. We talked about proxy wars, ideological divides, and the Cuban Missile Crisis. While we worked, Kevin looked up from his textbook. His voice was quieter than usual. "Dad," he started, "Mom's been crying a lot lately. When you're not here." He picked at a loose thread on his bedspread. "She just goes into her office and closes the door. And she doesn't really talk to me or Grace much." I paused, holding my pen still over his paper. My gaze settled on his young, concerned face. "She's just been a little stressed, buddy," I offered, trying to keep my voice even. "Things have been tough with work, for all of us." I managed a reassuring nod. Inside, the confirmation of my own observations, filtered through Kevin's innocent worry, added another layer to my growing unease. The public display, the private tears, the financial questions. A pattern was beginning to form. Later, as I walked downstairs past the landing, I heard Sarah's voice from the living room. It was low, hushed, almost conspiratorial. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was intimate, distinct from her usual conversations with her girls from the office or her mother. The moment my foot touched the last step, the cadence of her voice changed. There was an abrupt silence, followed by a quick, clipped, "I'll call you back." She turned, her phone already lowered from her ear. Her eyes met mine, a flicker of something unreadable there. Surprise, perhaps, or irritation. "Everything all right?" I asked, affecting a casual tone as I headed towards the kitchen for a glass of water. "Just one of the girls from the office," she replied, a little too quickly. She placed the phone on the coffee table. Her shoulders were stiff. Sounded like a serious conversation, I pressed gently, filling my glass. Her head snapped up. Her face hardened. The vulnerability from earlier replaced by a defiant anger I hadn't seen in years. "Are you interrogating me now, Frank?" Her voice was sharp, cutting. "I thought we just talked about me needing some space, some understanding. You're gone for weeks, and now you come home and start questioning my phone calls?" The sudden aggression was a wall, effectively shutting down any further inquiry. I simply stared at her for a moment, then took a slow sip of water. "No," I said, my voice flat. "Just asking. You seemed upset." She turned away, dismissing me with her back. "I'm fine, just tired." I retreated to my study. The evening felt heavy. I opened my laptop and checked the Singapore Stock Exchange, a routine I maintained, and even though I was no longer employed. The market had edged up a minor fraction of a percentage point. It was a detail I recorded, a small anchor in a sea of emotional ambiguity. I closed the laptop. My mind felt exhausted, not from the day's events, but from the constant processing of information, the quiet compilation of conflicting data points. After a while, I heard the bathroom door close, then open again. Sarah was done. I went in, performed my nightly routine. The bathroom was still warm from her shower. When I finally climbed into bed, the room was dark. She was already lying on her side, facing away from me. I reached out, my hand resting gently on her hip. She tensed. The muscles under my palm tightened. "Just hold me, Frank," she murmured, her voice muffled, not turning. "I just need you to hold me." I did. My arm went around her, my hand resting on her shoulder. Her back remained stiff against me. There was no reciprocal movement, no seeking of comfort, only a passive acceptance of my presence. I lay awake for a long time, listening to the regulated rhythm of her breathing. My mind spun through a silent calculus. Something fundamentally wrong repeated itself like a broken record. A deep, pervasive sense of unease settled over me. It wasn't just a mood or stress or depression. It was something else. I considered the possibilities: a separation, a hidden illness, or the most unsettling thought, another person. The last option, a betrayal, felt increasingly plausible despite my resistance to it. I woke at 4:30 a.m. The quality of sleep had been poor, fragmented by the unresolved questions that circled in my mind. A dull ache throbbed behind my eyes. I felt sick, physically tired from the mental exertion. I pulled on running shorts and a faded t-shirt, laced up my old sneakers, and headed out into the pre-dawn chill. The air was still and damp. I ran the usual 5-mile loop through the quiet residential streets, past the sleeping houses, each window a dark, unrevealing rectangle. The physical exertion provided a temporary reprieve, a clear focus for my body if not my mind. When I returned, sweat-soaked, the house was silent. Sarah was already gone. A note lay on the kitchen counter, brief and to the point. "Took the kids to school. Meeting. We'll pick them up." No kiss, no love, just logistics. The note felt like another data point, confirming the detachment. I went to my study. The early hour was good for focused work. I completed the transfer of a substantial sum from my JP Morgan account to an offshore account I had maintained for years. It was a preemptive measure initiated weeks ago when I first noticed the subtle shifts in our shared finances. The initial transfer had been smaller, a test. This was the main withdrawal. My CA shares, which I checked daily, continued their slow decline. That was a concern, a financial erosion I could track, unlike the silent disintegration of my marriage. It forced a prioritization. The immediate threat to my personal assets outweighed the broader market volatility. Kevin and Grace returned home later that afternoon. I made them sandwiches, their usual after-school snack. We sat at the kitchen island. So what have you two been up to while I was away? I asked, keeping my tone light. Grace chewed slowly, then spoke. Oh, we went to miniature golf with Todd Jensen and Lily. They're really fun. Todd helps me with my math homework sometimes. Kevin nodded, his mouth full. Yeah, and we went to the movies. Lily made popcorn. It felt like one big happy family. He smiled at the memory. The words Todd Jensen hit me like a physical blow. The name resonated with an immediate, sickening familiarity. Todd Jensen, my company's biggest competitor, the man whose firm had just acquired the Singapore account I'd painstakingly secured. The man who had, inadvertently, contributed to my recent layoff. Lily, his wife, a woman I'd met once or twice at industry events, always at Todd's side. The pieces clicked, brutally. The missing funds, Sarah's cryptic phone calls, her sudden emotional withdrawals, the forgotten birthday. It wasn't just a person, it was this person. The strategic implications were vast. I kept my face neutral. My voice remained steady. That sounds like a lot of fun, I said, a forced pleasantness in my tone. I'm glad you both had a good time. Maybe we should plan a summer vacation, just us. They brightened at the suggestion. I drove them to their after-school activities, the name Todd Jensen now an oppressive weight in the silence of the truck. Every detail they'd shared, every casual mention of shared activities, now tasted of calculated betrayal. Later from my study, I called Mitch Stevens. He was an old mentor, a retired senior partner from my engineering firm, known for his calm counsel and sharp intellect. Mitch, I began after the usual pleasantries, I need some advice. It's about a friend. He's discovered some unsettling things about his wife's recent behavior. He suspects something serious, maybe another person. Mitch listened silently. When I finished, he cleared his throat. Frank, he said, his voice slow and measured. First thing, no impulsive decisions. Emotion is the enemy of strategy. Your friend needs to observe. Methodically, collect facts, document everything. The colder he keeps it, the clearer he'll see. His advice, though framed for a friend, confirmed my own internal course of action. This was not a situation for emotional outbursts. This was a situation for data, for evidence, for a methodical dismantling, just as my life was being methodically dismantled. Every choice had a cost, a ripple effect that extended far beyond the initial action. It makes a man wonder what kind of life he's built, and for whom. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. The name Todd Jensen echoed in my thoughts. After dropping the children at school, I drove home and went directly to my study. The internet became my primary tool. I started with a simple search, Todd Jensen, then narrowed it to Todd Jensen Marketing Executive. Within minutes, I found him. His professional profile detailed a long career in marketing, culminating in his current role as a senior executive at Sterling and Hayes, the very firm where Sarah worked. My suspicion hardened into something more concrete. It was not just a competitor, it was a colleague. Further searching revealed a small, almost hidden article from a local business journal's personal section. Prominent executive Todd Jensen finalizes divorce. The date of the article was recent, only 3 months old. This detail cemented a disturbing timeline. His newly available status aligned perfectly with Sarah's emotional withdrawal, the onset of her stress, and her increasing demands for my presence at home, all while she was building something new elsewhere. It was a calculated move, not an accidental affair. The pattern of Sarah's behavior at home became clearer through this lens. Her late nights at the office grew more frequent. She would leave around 7 in the morning and often not return until 9 or 10 in the evening. Her excuses were always vague. A big project, client presentations, team brainstorming sessions. I started noting the odometer reading on her silver sedan before she left and after she returned. The mileage increments were usually consistent with her commute, but on 2 occasions, they indicated an additional 30 to 40 miles, unaccounted for by her stated work locations. These were small discrepancies, but they accumulated, adding weight to the developing narrative. I accessed our household phone records online. Scrolling through months of calls, I looked for anomalies. Most numbers were familiar, family, friends, services. But then I saw it, an unlisted number, dialed consistently, usually in the late evenings, sometimes early mornings. The calls were often short, under 2 minutes, but the frequency was undeniable. This number did not belong to any of her known friends or colleagues. It appeared in bursts, coinciding with her late nights. The logical next step was to confirm the physical movements. I acquired a small, discreet GPS tracker online. It arrived 2 days later in an unmarked package. That evening, after Sarah was asleep, I slipped out to the garage. The air was cool, smelling faintly of oil and gasoline. I located a sturdy, inconspicuous spot on the underside of her car, near the rear bumper, and attached the magnetic device. It was a quiet operation, completed in less than 2 minutes. The small green light blinked once, a silent confirmation of its activation. Back inside, I moved through the house with a purpose. I had already made copies of our shared bank statements. Now I systematically copied all household credit card bills. I went through her coat pockets, an action that felt intrusive but necessary. In the pocket of her beige trench coat, a receipt crackled beneath my fingers. It was from the Gilded Spoon, an expensive downtown restaurant known for its intimate atmosphere and private dining rooms. The date was last Tuesday, a night she had claimed to be working late on a presentation. The total bill, almost $200, indicated more than just a quick bite. It pointed to a leisurely, perhaps romantic, dinner. The accumulation of evidence was overwhelming. My methodical approach was yielding results, but it also painted a stark picture. I needed professional assistance. I pulled up Mitch Stevens' number. He'd been explicit in his advice. The colder he keeps it, the clearer he'll see. And he'd mentioned Bob. "Mitch," I said when he answered, "my friend needs a recommendation for a discreet investigator. Someone thorough." Mitch paused. "Bob's his name, Bob Thompson. Good man, stays quiet, gets the job done. I'll text you his number now." A minute later, my phone buzzed. Bob's number appeared on the screen. The decision was made. The quiet pursuit had to intensify. I met Bob in a quiet diner on the outskirts of town. He was a man of unassuming presence, average height, dressed in a plain jacket. His eyes, however, were sharp, taking in everything without appearing to. I slid the folder across the worn Formica table. It contained the printouts of Sarah's phone records, the mileage logs, the GPS tracking data, and the receipt from the Gilded Spoon. I explained the situation, keeping my voice level, factual, devoid of emotion. "I need to know where she's going," I concluded, "and with whom. Specifically Todd Jensen." Bob nodded, a slight tilt of his head. "Understood. I'll start with her movements during work hours and evenings. You'll get daily updates discreetly." The first report arrived via encrypted email 3 days later. It was concise, professional. It confirmed that Sarah's car, on 2 separate late-night occasions, had not been parked at her office building for the duration she claimed. Instead, the GPS data showed it at an address on the north side of town, approximately 10 miles from her office. The report noted the address belonged to a Todd Jensen. This initial report contained no photographs, just movements and locations matching my own data. It was simply the validation I needed. The second report, however, was far more definitive. It arrived a week after the first, a heavier file attached to Bob's usual brief email. This one included clear, time-stamped photographic evidence. I opened the file on my laptop, the screen illuminating the quiet study. The first sequence showed Sarah and Todd Jensen. They were seated at a table in the Gilded Spoon, the same restaurant from the receipt. Sarah was leaning forward, her head tilted, a smile on her face. Todd was laughing, his hand lightly resting on hers across the table. The image was undeniable. Their body language spoke of intimacy, shared secrets, a connection far beyond professional colleagues. The time and date matched the receipt I'd found in her coat pocket. Another photograph showed them leaving the restaurant, walking closely, arm in arm. Sarah looked up at him, her expression soft. The next set of photos was even more damning. It showed Sarah's car parked in the driveway of the north side address, the one Bob had identified as Todd Jensen's residence. One image captured them both late one evening, entering the front door. Sarah carried a small overnight bag. The final image in that sequence showed the lights in the house going out shortly after. I closed the laptop. The cold, hard images burned behind my eyelids. My earlier suspicions, nurtured by subtle cues and financial discrepancies, were no longer suspicions. They were facts. The methodical investigation had peeled back the layers, revealing the stark reality beneath. I compared the locations in the photos to Sarah's stated whereabouts on those specific dates. Every alibi was a lie, every late-night meeting was a rendezvous. A new thought struck me. I walked to the master bedroom, opened Sarah's jewelry box. The small velvet lining was bare where her wedding ring should have been. Her engagement ring, the diamond I'd saved for, and her simple gold wedding band worn for 20 years. Neither was there. I checked the small safe in the back of her closet, a place she sometimes kept sentimental items. Empty. Their absence spoke volumes. She had removed the symbols of our commitment, preparing for a future that did not include me. I picked up the phone. Larry Brooks's number was already in my recent calls. He answered on the second ring. "Larry," I stated, "I have the evidence. It's conclusive. I need to meet with you, first thing." "Understood, Frank," he replied, his voice calm. "Come in at 8. We'll outline your options." The path was now clear, if not easy. The legal framework needed to be established. The emotional toll would come later, but for now, there was only the cold logic of legal procedure. The folder lay open on the kitchen island. Inside were the printed photographs from Bob, the detailed GPS logs, the bank statements with their damning zero balance, the high-end restaurant receipt, and my own meticulous notes on Sarah's mileage and phone calls. I had spent the past 2 days organizing it all, building a chronological, irrefutable narrative. Every piece of evidence pointed in the same direction. Simultaneously, I had initiated an independent appraisal of our house and other significant assets. It was a methodical preparation, leaving no stone unturned. Larry Brooks had confirmed my position. "Frank," he'd said, leaning back in his chair, "this is a strong case. Very strong. The infidelity, the financial depletion. You've done your homework. We have a clear path forward." His words were clinical, reassuring. They resonated with the cold logic I now operated under. I chose a Tuesday evening for the confrontation. Kevin and Grace were both in bed, their lights out. The house was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator. Sarah was reading in the living room, a mug of tea beside her. I walked in, carrying the open folder. "Sarah," I began, my voice even, devoid of the tremor I felt just beneath the surface. "We need to talk." She looked up, her expression shifting from mild irritation at the interruption to a flicker of apprehension. She set her book down. "What is it, Frank?" I placed the folder on the coffee table between us, pushing it slightly towards her. The top photo, a clear shot of her and Todd Jensen laughing intimately over dinner at the Gilded Spoon, was visible. "This," I said, pointing to the photograph, "is from last Tuesday, the night you said you were working late on a presentation." I then presented the restaurant receipt, the GPS data showing her car at Todd's address, the phone records, and the mileage on your car, the missing funds from our joint account. My voice remained steady, factual. No accusations, just presentation of facts. Her eyes scanned the evidence. Her face went pale, then a blotchy red. "What is this, Frank? Some kind of setup?" Her initial response was denial, a familiar defensive maneuver. "It's just a work dinner. Todd and I have been collaborating closely on a big project." She tried to sound indignant, but her voice lacked conviction. "And the missing wedding rings, Sarah," I interjected, cutting through her fabrication. "Are those part of a big project too?" That seemed to break her. Her defiance crumbled. Her shoulders slumped. Her head fell into her hands and she began to sob soft, choked sounds at first, then escalating. "I'm so sorry, Frank," she gasped between sobs. "I'm so sorry." She raised her head, her face tear-streaked. "I felt so alone, Frank," she pleaded, her voice thick with emotion. "You were always gone. I felt neglected, like you didn't hear me anymore. Todd just listened. He understood." Her words were a torrent of self-justification, a narrative of victimhood. I listened. My expression remained impassive. The profound sense of betrayal was a cold, hard knot in my chest. Her confession confirmed everything, but her reasons, however passionately delivered, did little to mitigate the damage. They felt like excuses for a systematic, calculated deception. "Do you understand what you've done, Sarah?" I asked, my voice still quiet. "Not just to me, but to Kevin and Grace? To everything we built?" This isn't just about feeling lonely. This is about emptying our shared accounts, lying, betraying our marriage, and involving the children with this man. I gestured to the photographs. This has devastating implications for all of us, for our future. She cried harder. I know, I messed up. I made a terrible mistake. Can we fix this, Frank? Please tell me we can fix this. The remorse seemed genuine in that moment, but the trust I knew was irrevocably shattered. It was a foundation I could not rebuild. No, Sarah, I said, standing up. The finality in my voice was absolute. We can't. I'm filing for divorce. Immediately. I picked up the folder. The evidence was no longer just proof of her actions. It was the roadmap to our separation. The divorce proceedings began with the efficiency Larry Brooks had promised. Paperwork was filed, motions were drafted, and the meticulously collected evidence was submitted. The process was cold, legal, and necessary. It was a dismantling, piece by piece, of 20 years of shared life. Each signature, each court document, was a further step away from the man I had been. I moved into a small, furnished apartment across town. It was temporary, functional, lacking the personal touches of a home but offering a clear, physical separation. The silence in the evenings was profound, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator or the occasional distant siren. It allowed for reflection, a necessary processing of the new reality. Kevin and Grace struggled, as expected. The news of the divorce, delivered carefully by both Sarah and me, hit them hard. Grace became withdrawn, her grades slipping slightly. Kevin, usually stoic, showed flashes of anger and confusion. My primary focus became them. I made sure to be present, to listen, to reassure them that they were loved, that this was not their fault. I picked them up from school, helped with homework, cooked their favorite meals. Co-parenting became my most important role, a guiding principle in the wreckage. My logical mind, now unburdened by marital pretense, found new purpose. I dove deeper into managing my offshore investments, exploring new markets, analyzing trends. It provided a structure, a challenging intellectual pursuit that allowed me to channel my focus away from the emotional landscape. The small apartment became my command center, a space for rebuilding. Sarah, I heard, was struggling. The public nature of the affair, particularly with a prominent competitor like Todd Jensen, had an immediate impact. Whispers followed her at work. Friendships fractured. The once tight social circles of our community became colder, less forgiving. She had to face the stark reality of her choices, the loss of her marriage, the fragmentation of our family unit. The consequences were not just mine to bear. Todd Jensen also found his professional standing in the community impacted. Business relationships, built on trust and discretion, were strained. The acquisition of my old firm's account, once a triumph, now carried a bitter taste, publicly linked to an affair that had destroyed two families. The quiet disdain of the Midwestern business community was a powerful, subtle force. I reflected on the entire methodical process, from the initial seeds of doubt to the careful collection of evidence, the confrontation, and now the legal unwinding. It had been a logical investigation, driven by a need for truth, an unwillingness to accept ambiguity. The pain was still there, a dull ache beneath the surface, but it was tempered by a grim strength, a clarity that came from seeing the truth, unvarnished and undeniable. There was no sudden peace, no epiphany of joy. Instead, a slow, profound sense of closure began to settle. The questions had been answered, the lies exposed. The consequences, though harsh, were deserved. I was a solitary figure now, charting a future redefined by betrayal, but also by my own resilience, my methodical pursuit of justice, and the cold, logical understanding of how life's costly choices unfold. The divorce proceedings, once initiated, moved with a deliberate, grinding pace. Larry Brooks, true to his word, used every piece of evidence I had gathered. Sarah's legal team, initially aggressive, found themselves constantly on the defensive. The photographic proof, the GPS logs detailing her nights at Todd Jensen's residence, and especially the bank statements showing the empty joint account, left little room for argument. The focus shifted from blame to practicalities, albeit under the shadow of her undeniable actions. She's trying to argue for more spousal support, Larry reported during one of our weekly meetings. Claims emotional distress, neglect. But with what we have, Frank, that's a non-starter. Especially the financial part. Judges don't look kindly on preemptive asset depletion. I nodded, absorbing the legal jargon. My mind was already calculating the next steps, anticipating Sarah's counter-arguments and preparing my responses. I had meticulously itemized all expenses related to Kevin and Grace, school tuition, extracurricular activities, clothing, healthcare. This formed the basis for my child support proposal, designed to be fair but not extravagant, reflecting her new, diminished circumstances. Life in the temporary apartment settled into a rhythm. The small space, initially stark, began to feel like home. I had set up a dedicated corner for my children during their custody weeks, ensuring their rooms were comfortable, filled with their books and games. We had dinner together most nights, the television off, our conversations focused on their day, their school, their friends. I made a conscious effort to rebuild the consistent, present father figure I believed I needed to be. Kevin and Grace continued to navigate their parents' separation. Grace, quieter than usual, often retreated into her books. I noticed her drawing more, intricate sketches that conveyed a subtle sadness. Kevin, on the other hand, occasionally bristled, a quick temper flaring when minor things went wrong. He missed the larger house, the familiar routine. I understood their pain. It was a mirror of my own, fractured differently. My role was not to fix their emotions, but to provide a stable anchor, a predictable environment where they felt safe and heard. During drop-offs and pickups, I observed Sarah. The initial defiance had given way to a palpable weariness. Her eyes, once sharp, often seemed distant. The forced smiles she offered the children felt strained. The consequences of her choices were visibly weighing on her, not just legally and financially, but emotionally. She spoke less, offered fewer excuses. The reality of her fragmented life was setting in. From Bob, who occasionally provided updates, and from the quiet hum of town gossip, I learned that Todd Jensen's business was indeed facing scrutiny. The local engineering and development community was small, intertwined. Reputations mattered. The ethical breach of having an affair with a client's wife, especially one who had emptied joint accounts, had not gone unnoticed. Some contracts were delayed, others quietly reevaluated. Their relationship, once clandestine, was now a public spectacle, and the inherent stresses of such a situation were reportedly taking their toll. My own offshore investments continued their steady, upward trajectory. The disciplined analysis, the careful allocation of funds, provided a sense of control that had been missing in my personal life for months. It was a tangible measure of success, divorced from emotional entanglements. I found a new discipline in my daily life, an almost monastic focus on what I could control: my work, my finances, my children's well-being. The betrayal still resonated, a deep chord, but I processed it not with anger, but with an analytical understanding of human nature, of choice and consequence. The legal process, in its methodical severing of ties, felt like a cleansing act. It removed the cancer, leaving behind the scar tissue, but also the space for new growth. I observed the altered social dynamics in town, the quiet judgments, the subtle shifts in how people interacted. Our small Midwestern community, ever vigilant, was adjusting to the new fault lines. The future remained unwritten, but it would be built on the cold, hard truths I had painstakingly uncovered. The final divorce decree arrived in the mail, a thick envelope from Larry Brooks's office. It was a formal legal document, dry and official, marking the definitive end of my marriage to Sarah. I read through the terms one last time. They reflected the weight of the evidence I had presented: minimal spousal support for Sarah, an equitable division of assets heavily influenced by her depletion of the joint account, and joint custody of Kevin and Grace, with my apartment designated as their primary residence. It was a fair, if stark, resolution. The judgment felt less like victory and more like simple arithmetic. With the legality settled, a new chapter truly began. My apartment, once temporary, was now fully home. Kevin and Grace had their routines, their designated spaces. I continued to prioritize their stability, ensuring a predictable schedule, healthy meals, and an open ear for their thoughts. Grace slowly began to emerge from her shell. Her artwork, which had become more introspective, started to show flashes of her old vibrancy. She would spend hours sketching, her focus intense, her imagination a refuge. Kevin, while still reserved at times, found an outlet in sports. He joined a local basketball team, channeling his energy and frustration into physical activity, his occasional outbursts replaced by the sweat and camaraderie of the court. I attended every game, a silent, supportive presence on the sidelines. My own social life, once intertwined with Sarah's, began to cautiously expand. I re-engaged with old friends who had given me space during the tumultuous period. There were new connections too, often through the children's school or community events, platonic, easy interactions that didn't demand anything more than shared conversation. The emotional burden, which had felt like a constant pressure, gradually lessened. It was replaced by a sense of self-reliance, a quiet independence I hadn't realized I craved. Sarah's life, from what I observed and what filtered through the periphery of town, had visibly shifted. She and Todd Jensen remained together, but their public appearances were less frequent, less overtly affectionate than before. The initial spark, if it had ever truly existed beyond infatuation, seemed to have faded, replaced by the mundane realities of a relationship forged in controversy. The town's quiet judgment remained. It was a palpable force, not an accusation but a permanent awareness, influencing how people interacted with them both. It was a consequence that neither of them could outrun in a community as tightly knit as ours. My offshore investments continued to perform. The diversification, the careful risk assessments, the consistent monitoring it all paid off. My financial independence was secure, a quiet personal victory that affirmed my methodical approach to life. There was satisfaction in building something new, something honest, free from the deceptions that had characterized the end of my marriage. The moral tension, which had quietly hummed beneath every interaction for months, finally settled. It left behind a stark clarity. Choices had been made, consequences had unfolded. The process had been painful, drawn out, but it had yielded truth and a path forward. I embraced my role as a solo father, finding deep fulfillment in nurturing Kevin and Grace, watching them grow and heal. My life was no longer defined by betrayal, but by resilience and the cold, logical understanding that every action eventually finds its true cost. Life moved forward, a current carrying everyone to new, altered shores. Frank, from his detached vantage point, observed the landscape. Sarah and Todd Jensen continued their life together, a public couple now, their story etched into the collective memory of their small Midwestern town. The initial blaze of their affair had long since flickered into the muted gray of routine, burdened by the weight of scandal and fractured reputations. They existed under a perpetual quiet scrutiny, a consequence more enduring than any legal decree. The children, Kevin and Grace, were resilient, adapting to their bifurcated lives. But the invisible fault lines of their parents' betrayal would forever be a part of their emotional topography, shaping their future relationships, their understanding of trust. Frank, having navigated the intricate, cold logic of discovery and divorce, found a grim clarity. His life was simpler now, unburdened by deceit, built on a foundation of unyielding truth. He had rebuilt, not by forgiving, but by understanding the profound and costly consequences of betrayal. The ripples extended endlessly. The years that followed the divorce cemented the profound and continuing consequences of Sarah's betrayal. Frank's life, meticulously rebuilt, carried the indelible mark of what had been lost. He found a new kind of quiet strength, a clarity born from having faced an undeniable truth. Yet the trust, once shattered, remained an empty space in his heart. His children, Kevin and Grace, though resilient, navigated their world with an awareness of fragility, their innocence irrevocably altered by their mother's choices. Sarah and Todd Jensen remained together, their relationship a public artifact of their affair. The initial fervor had settled into a strained coexistence, perpetually shadowed by the town's quiet judgment and the professional fallout that continued to affect Todd. Their lives, once seemingly limitless, were now circumscribed by the consequences of a single, devastating act. The ripple effects of that summer picnic, of Sarah's public declaration and her calculated deceptions, continued to shape every corner of their existence, a stark testament to the lasting cost of betrayal in a small, observant world.